Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the dripping wet, leaf-sheltered world of ancient Java, where the skies didn't just cry, they tantrumed, and umbrellas weren't even a concept yet. Picture this. You're trudging barefoot through a narrow jungle trail. The humidity clings like a second skin, and then, bam! The heavens split open like someone turned a bucket upside down. There's no warning, no app to check, just rain, a lot of it. And if you don't move fast, you're going to spend the rest of the day looking like a half-drowned monkey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a bamboo hut with no door, just a curtain of woven reeds fluttering in the breeze. Outside, a rooster crows like it's choking on something, and before your feet even hit the floor, you hear it. That low rumble, like a giant stomach growling. The clouds are already bruising with rain. It's the start of another monsoon day in 9th century Java. The monsoon cycle rules everything. It's not just weather. It's a season, a mindset, almost a personality. For months, the skies open daily with bone-chilling precision. And since no one's invented anything like a collapsible umbrella, yet, staying dry is a full-time struggle. Spoiler alert, you will lose. Your morning chores start with trudging to the rice fields. The path is already a slurry of mud and frog carcasses, the kind that squish unpleasantly underfoot. Rain hasn't started yet, but the air's so thick you could wring it out like a sponge. And because you're a peasant, you own exactly 2 outfits, the one you're wearing and the one still wet from yesterday. You glance up, the sky looks like a dirty bedsheet. The first fat droplets hit your shoulders just as you reach the field. You mutter something under your breath, probably something your grandmother wouldn't approve of. But really, what are your options? Umbrellas don't exist in your world, at least not for you. Sure, there's the payung kebesaran, those massive ceremonial parasols carried over kings and nobles, but those are status symbols. You? You're lucky if you get a banana leaf. Monsoon isn't just about getting wet. It's about living wet. Rice planting depends on it, of course, but so do mosquitoes, mildew, and the unfortunate habit of roofs leaking directly over sleeping mats. You learn to sleep curled like a shrimp, dodging drips. Mainstream historical records show the Javanese calendar divided time into wet and dry phases, with rituals tied to the rain's arrival. Shrines were scrubbed, chickens were sacrificed, and village elders squinted at cloud patterns like amateur meteorologists. Yet, historians still argue whether early rain prediction methods, based on frog croaks and the smell of riverbanks, were actual science or wishful thinking. There's a quirky little tidbit here. In some highland communities, old women would light bundles of chili and toss them into the fire. The belief that the smoke would irritate the sky and drive the clouds away. Judging by the persistent rain, the sky had no nose. So as the rain starts to fall harder, you hunch your shoulders and press forward. A banana leaf won't help now. You're too far from the trees. Your hair clings to your face. Your tunic sags like laundry. and your only defense is muttering at the sky like it cares. You pass a few others doing the same shuffle. One guy has tied his sarong into a hood. It looks ridiculous, but at least his head is mostly dry. You consider copying him, but then remember the time you tripped over your own sarong and face planted into a puddle. Once was enough. Then there's that smell. Wet earth, smoke, and fermented fish paste. That's home. That's ancient Java in the rain. A passing noble glides by under a parasol so wide it could shade an elephant. It's held aloft by a servant who looks like he'd rather be struck by lightning than drop it. The parasol is carved with patterns of Garuda wings and crowned with a little brass finial shaped like a lotus. That parasol means something. It's not just to keep him dry. It says this man owns dry. You keep walking, and here's where things get philosophical. See, getting wet in Java wasn't a failure. It was inevitable. Life was designed around the rain. Roofs were steep, drainage paths were sacred, and bathhouses were basically a warm-up for whatever the clouds had in store. There were no umbrellas, no raincoats, just a quiet resignation that for half the year, everything smelled like wet straw. You finally reach the edge of the paddy field. The mud sucks at your ankles with the enthusiasm of a clingy toddler. Your job today is to transplant seedlings, which means squatting in shin-deep water for hours, rain or no rain. The downpour thickens, drumming on your back. You blink through the drops and keep going. Because what else are you going to do? Wait for someone to invent Gore-Tex? You're still soaked. You've been soaked for hours, and the squelch of your feet in the muddy paddy is now just background noise. The rain has eased, but everything, your skin, your clothes, your mood, is still soggy. On your way back toward the village, you do what every soaked Javanese commoner learns to do early in life: improvise. You veer off the path slightly to where a line of tall fan palms grows near the edge of the jungle. These trees are practically legends. Borassus flabellifer, known locally as siwalan, with broad leaves that can span nearly a meter across. They're nature's original umbrellas. You reach up, snap off a mostly intact frond, fold it slightly, and hoist it overhead. It drips. It smells faintly of mildew and monkey pee. But it works. In fact, palm fronds weren't just useful in a pinch. They were a staple. Villagers wove them into daily life: roofs, mats, food wrappers, and yes, rain covers. The weaving was simple. Thread a few together in an overlapping fan pattern, secure with strips of rattan, and you've got yourself a temporary shield. It wouldn't survive a typhoon, but it could buy you enough time to dash between huts with a dry head and a shred of dignity. Over time, people got clever. Artisans developed foldable rain shields from interwoven banana fibers and palm strands, sometimes stretched over a thin bamboo frame. Picture a kind of floppy tent on a stick. Not elegant, not especially portable, but better than going full amphibian during the wet season. And for all its rustic clumsiness, this fan frond design was surprisingly effective, lightweight, biodegradable, and abundant. Historians still debate whether these woven rain shields were ever standardized into something more like an umbrella. Some ancient reliefs from the Borobudur temple show figures holding rounded objects overhead, but whether these were true parasols or symbolic halos is still up for argument. You squint at the frond in your hand. A gust of wind catches it, nearly yanking it free. You grip tighter. The rain starts again, as it always does, like a prank from above. And once again, you trudge on. In wealthier households, the leaves weren't just raw. They were treated, rubbed with plant oils to increase water resistance. Some were even singed lightly over a fire, creating a waxy coating that repelled water like the shell of a beetle. It was one of those little tricks passed down by grandmothers who knew 1,000 secrets about things you'd never think to ask. Of course, not all plants were equal. Banana leaves, for instance, looked great, broad, sleek, and conveniently shaped. But they had a fatal flaw. They tore faster than rice paper in wind. You learned early to only trust the young leaves, the ones still curled up tightly. Older leaves? Useless. You might as well hold up a napkin. Still, the banana leaf had its defenders. Kids especially loved them. There was a certain joy in running around during a rainstorm with a massive green leaf on your head, pretending to be a turtle, or a warrior, or just not wet. You remember one boy in the village who fashioned a rain cape entirely out of banana leaves sewn together with coconut fiber thread. He strutted around like royalty until the seams split and he became a walking compost pile. Then there were the traders, always on the move, rain or not. They couldn't afford to be soaked all day, especially if they were hauling salt or rice cakes wrapped in delicate donjati. Some carried portable woven shields, flat panels they could lift over their goods or tie to their carts. Others used taro leaves, which had a waxy coating and naturally repelled water. You once watched a woman pluck a taro leaf the size of her torso, press it against her back like a shield, and keep walking as if she were wearing the future. And it wasn't just about staying dry. It was about staying dignified. People had weddings in the rain, ceremonies, funerals. Crops were planted, babies born, temples prayed at, all under rain. Makeshift frond umbrellas weren't just practical. They were tools of resilience. Little statements that said, "Yes, the sky is trying to drown me, but I'm still going to the market." You return to the village just as a group of elders are lounging under the long eaves of the communal pavilion, chewing betel and arguing about who forgot to cover the firewood. One of them has a woven palm shield folded neatly beside him. It's stained, weather-beaten, and repaired with thin strips of leather. But it's been with him for years. There's something comforting about that. In a world where metal was rare and fabric precious, the forest gave people what they needed. All it took was knowledge. Knowledge passed from hand to hand, hut to hut, generation to generation. You start to understand why stories were carved into temple stones. Nothing written, everything remembered. And of course, as soon as you think it's done raining, it isn't. A final cloud drifts overhead and releases one last sigh of drizzle. You sigh right back and tuck your fan frond closer. At this point, you're less person, more moss-covered creature. Still, it's not all bad. The rain cools the air. It softens the ground. It brings frogs, and frogs mean good luck. Maybe tomorrow, the monsoon will give you a break, but probably not. You notice it the moment the procession starts. The hush that spreads through the village, like even the rain knows it's time to behave. There's a rustle of anticipation, a few heads popping out from behind hanging reed blinds. And then it appears, a royal entourage moving slowly, ceremoniously, under a canopy of enormous gold-trimmed parasols. Not rain shields, not palm hacks or leaf capes. These are payung kebesaran, grand umbrellas of power, status, and absolutely no practicality for commoners like you. But wow, they're dazzling. Each one is held high by a separate servant, trembling slightly under its weight. The parasols are huge, heavy, and richly decorated. Silk fringes swish gently along the rims. Wooden shafts are lacquered and carved with mythical creatures. Nagas winding up the poles, lions etched into the ribs. And at the very top of each is a small crown of bronze or gold, shaped like a blooming lotus, or sometimes a miniature temple. These aren't rain gear, they're symbols. In fact, if you're even caught touching one without permission, the punishment could range from public shaming to, depending on the mood of the noble in question, a brief stint in a bamboo cage. These umbrellas are the medieval Javanese version of royalty's personal brand. They go where the ruler goes. They stand above him, literally and politically. Mainstream historians agree that ceremonial parasols in Java had their roots in Indian and Buddhist influences, carried through maritime trade with the Indian subcontinent. You can trace their imagery back to ancient stupas, where parasols were depicted floating above divine figures like halos on sticks. But unlike halos, these required an entire class of attendants just to hold them up. And therein lies the joke. You're soaking wet. Your frond umbrella now wilted like week-old lettuce. And a man rides past you under two overlapping gold canopies, dry, pampered, and probably unaware of the small squish noise you just made stepping aside. You've heard the whispers. Nobles didn't just use parasols to keep off rain. They used them as part of elaborate processions meant to convey divine protection. Some ceremonies had umbrella bearers who stood in for ancestral spirits, meant to shield the ruler from not just weather, but cosmic imbalance. Historians still argue whether these parasols were truly religious objects or just really dramatic sun hats. Either way, they worked. You're looking at one now, and it's hard not to be impressed. There's a fringe fact, too, something not often mentioned in the stone inscriptions. Some parasols doubled as status counters. The more umbrellas you had above your head, the higher your rank. The king? Maybe 7. A minor noble? 3. You? 0. 0 umbrellas, 0 silk. Just damp armpits and mud between your toes. Sometimes the parasols even had protective charms sewn inside the canopy. Small scrolls of Sanskrit mantras or offerings of betel nut tucked into hidden pockets. Superstition or spiritual armor? Scholars still debate it, but the belief was strong enough that no royal parasol was ever allowed to touch the ground. If it did, it had to be ritually cleansed or burned. Back in the village, you remember a time when a traveling prince stopped for rest. A temporary canopy was set up for him. 4 parasols mounted to carved poles, each placed precisely by court astrologers to align with the cardinal directions. Locals were ordered to stay back, and a special cloth was laid over the dirt so his sandals wouldn't touch bare earth. Meanwhile, you and the other kids watched from the bushes, chewing on sugar cane, and wondering if being dry all the time made a person boring. Another time, during a drought, one noble brought his ceremonial parasol into the temple courtyard and left it propped open as an offering to the gods. It didn't work. The rain came a week later, but it came hard and blew the parasol halfway across the lotus pond. So yes, they were beautiful. They were powerful, but they weren't particularly useful if you were a farmer trying to get through a thunderstorm with dry rice. You stand there now, watching the procession disappear down the road. The rain picks up again, gently at first, then with more enthusiasm, as if trying to remind you of your place. You reach for your trusty palm shield. It's sagging, a little bit torn, but it still works. Mostly. You duck into a nearby pavilion where a few other villagers are already gathered, dripping quietly. One of the elders chuckles as the last parasol vanishes into the mist. All that silk, and not one patch of it touches the rain, he says. What a waste. Someone else shrugs. Better than our fronds. You smile faintly. It's true, but at least your shield can be repaired. Grown, even. You could harvest another leaf tomorrow, press it, thread it, and boom, instant shelter. Try doing that with golden brocade. So maybe you don't have a payung kebesaran. Maybe your canopy looks more like a floppy pancake than a floating temple. But it's yours, and that counts for something. At least until the next gust of wind. The rain has passed, for now. The air smells like steaming earth, and frogs are having a noisy conference somewhere in the distance. You've hung your frond shield to dry and settled under the eaves of your hut. But just when you think the wet chapter of the day is done, you spot something. A woman balancing a basket on her head, moving through the mist in a wide, conical hat. No fronds, no banana leaves. Just that beautifully simple woven wonder that somehow keeps her dry. That's the caping. The Javanese answer to what if your hat was also your roof. It's conical, made from bamboo and palm or pandan leaves, and large enough to cast a shadow over your entire torso if tilted right. You grew up seeing them everywhere. Farmers, traders, fisher folk, all wearing what looks like upside-down baskets on their heads. But when it rains, the hat transforms. Water glides off its edges in neat little curtains. Your shoulders might get a bit damp, but your scalp stays dry, and that's half the battle. Mainstream historical records show the caping's design hasn't changed much in over 1,000 years. Why would it? It's genius in its simplicity, lightweight, breathable, and oddly charming. And if you break one, easy fix. A bit of twine, a new leaf, and some patience. But hats weren't always enough. In the deeper corners of Java, where the jungle creeps close and superstition runs thicker than syrup, people turned to something a little more mystical. Rain dances and weather chants. You've seen them yourself. Women circling the rice terraces with bowls of flower petals, men standing on stones and clapping in odd rhythms, while muttering invocations to Dewi Shri, the goddess of rice and fertility. Some ceremonies involved dressing a child in leaves and parading them through the village like a rain spirit. Others sent women to the riverbanks to sing ancient songs about clouds and balance. Historians still argue whether these rituals were practical attempts at meteorology or just good excuses to avoid work when it got too muddy to plant anything. The fringe detail? In a few remote areas, villagers would hang frogs in little reed cages by the edge of the fields. The belief was that frogs, being rain lovers, could entice the sky into a downpour with their croaking. If the frogs stayed quiet, people got nervous. If they croaked too much, well, you'd better start weaving more capings. You remember once helping with one of these rituals as a child. A priestess handed you a string of chili peppers and told you to toss them into the communal fire. To heat the sky, she said. You didn't question it. You just squinted against the smoke and hoped the sky had a tongue. These days, you're less superstitious. Still, when the clouds gather thick and low, you catch yourself muttering one of those old chants under your breath. Just in case. Back in the village, cappings hang upside down from hooks, drying in the breeze. Some are new, still the pale yellow of fresh palm fiber. Others are darkened from age, sweat, and 100 storms. They carry stories, those hats, passed from parent to child, reshaped to fit new heads, sometimes even blessed during ceremonies. Not everyone wore them, of course. Some preferred turbans or headscarves, especially in areas with stronger Indian or Islamic influence. But for the wet season, the caping reigned supreme. And if you combined it with a loose outer wrap, a sheet of barkcloth or batik cotton, you could make a surprisingly efficient rain outfit. Not elegant, not dry, but functional. And speaking of wraps, there's another trick people used. The sarong shuffle. When caught in rain and hatless, some villagers would take their sarong, usually worn around the waist, and tug it up over the head like a poncho. It left you waddling like a duck and mostly blind, but for short dashes between huts, it worked. You tried it once, nearly walked into a goat. So really, when it rained in ancient Java, everyone had their method. Some trusted hats, some trusted leaves, others trusted gods, frogs, and a handful of old songs. And you've probably tried them all. The woman with the basket walks past, her conical caping shedding water with quiet grace. You nod to her. She doesn't nod back, probably because she's balancing 6 kilos of jackfruit on her head. But still, there's a mutual understanding. Caping people get it. In the distance, the clouds are shifting again. You hear thunder far off, deep like the belly of a sleeping mountain. Time to check your frond shield. Time to maybe oil your sarong if you're feeling fancy. And maybe, just maybe, time to hum a chant to Dewi Shri, even if you don't really believe she's listening. Because in Java, the rain always comes back. By now, your day has become a soggy loop of dashing from shelter to shelter, ducking under capings and fronds, and wringing out your sarong every few hours like it owes you money. You start to wonder how travelers ever managed in this swampy wonderland. And then you remember, they didn't always manage. They adapted, or they got sick, or they just stopped caring. You've left the village trail behind, winding your way toward the edge of the jungle, where ancient footpaths snake through tangled undergrowth and gnarled banyan roots. This is where the world gets serious. No neat rice paddies, no watchful elders. Just you, the rain, and whatever happens to be lurking behind that tree. Here, people relied on a different set of tools to handle the endless wet. Barkcloth cloaks, tree shelters, and the wondrous, slightly ridiculous giant leaves of the Ficus religiosa. Yes, that's right. A sacred fig tree. You wouldn't think salvation would come in the form of an oversized houseplant, but those wide, waxy leaves could turn a torrential downpour into little more than a drippy nuisance if you held one just right. You find one now. It's low-hanging, glossy, and broad enough to cover your torso. You snap it off the branch and hold it overhead like some kind of leafy shield. The stem creaks slightly in your grip. It's not glamorous, but neither are you at this point. This, by the way, is how many long-distance traders, monks, and even temple pilgrims got by. The jungle paths of ancient Java weren't exactly cart-friendly, and they definitely weren't dry. Most travelers wrapped themselves in barkcloth cloaks called kulit kayu, made from the inner bark of certain trees, pounded until soft. These cloaks weren't waterproof in the modern sense, but they were thick, fibrous, and could keep out the worst of the chill. Historians still argue whether barkcloth was primarily utilitarian or symbolic. Some cloaks, after all, were dyed with natural pigments and patterned with tribal markings. There's debate over whether certain patterns designated spiritual rank or simply the weaver's mood that day. One theory even suggests barkcloth cloaks were used in shamanic rituals, draped over mediums to shield them from rain of the spirit world. The fringe detail? Some bark cloth was mixed with wild resin or rubbed with beeswax to create a crude water-repellent barrier. It smelled like burnt honey and attracted curious insects, but hey, dry shoulders are worth a few beetles. You make your way further down the trail, eyes scanning for more giant leaves or maybe a thick clump of ferns to duck beneath. You pass a mossy shrine, half swallowed by vines, and remember that old tale. Travelers who didn't ask permission before entering the forest would be followed by rain wherever they went. The only solution? Leave an offering under the ficus tree and hope the spirits liked bananas. You left no bananas. Rookie mistake. The deeper you go, the more clever the solutions get. Some people stitch together layers of pohan waru bark into capes, binding them with twine made from split rattan. Others carried quick-weave mats rolled under their arms, something they could throw over themselves like a sad, prickly blanket during a sudden downpour. There were even records of early merchants carrying hollow bamboo tubes filled with dried leaves, string, and a small iron hook. With this, they could rig up a temporary shelter by suspending a mini canopy between tree limbs. Not quite a tent. More like an I tried statement to the weather gods. Still, there's something romantic about it. The jungle steams, the birds scream like broken flutes, and you're walking beneath layers of green upon green, all while clutching a giant fig leaf like some ancient eco-warrior. You probably smell awful, but at least you're adapting. You finally spot a clearing ahead, a temporary camp set up by a few traders. Smoke curls from a low fire, sheltered by a slanted awning of interwoven leaves. One of the men has a barkcloth cloak slung over a drying rack. Another is patching holes in a palm fiber canopy with what looks like chewed tree sap. They nod at you, but say nothing. Jungle travelers understand the unspoken code of damp solidarity. You crouch by the fire, letting the steam rise through your wet tunic. Around you, makeshift shelters shiver in the wind. One guy's cloak is just a patched-up fishing net lined with dried moss. Another woman has somehow fashioned a hooded wrap from banana bark. It's stiff, awkward, and makes her look like she's wearing a collapsed canoe, but it's impressively dry underneath. So you sit there, steaming and dripping, thinking about how no one out here has a real umbrella. Not because they couldn't invent one, but because they didn't really need to. They had trees, leaves, clever hands, bark that could be worn, and most of all, patience. Because if there's one thing you learn in the Javanese jungle during monsoon season, it's that staying dry isn't always possible, but staying smart, that's the real game. The jungle path ends, and suddenly, you're back in the bustle of the pasar, the market. If the jungle was quiet and dripping with patience, this place is the exact opposite. Shouting vendors, goats arguing in the corner, and the endless slap-slap of bare feet on puddled ground. And everywhere, wet people pretending they're not wet. You weave through the crowd, dodging a runaway duck and a toddler in a bucket. It's raining again, of course. But the market doesn't stop. Nobody here has the time or the luxury to wait for a dry day. The only real question is what clever solution each person has cooked up to deal with the weather this time. Some vendors have strung woven mats across the fronts of their stalls, slanted like floppy awnings. Others are huddled under waxy bundles of taro leaves tied together with strips of banana bark. But the true fashion statement today? The wet sarong hack. It's a move everyone knows, but no one looks cool doing. The moment the rain hits, sarongs, the long rectangular cloths worn around the waist, get pulled up over heads, twisted into makeshift hoods, ponchos, or, when panic sets in, full-body burrito wraps. You're watching a man now trying to negotiate a price on tamarind while wearing his sarong like a medieval hoodie. It's heroic. It's tragic. It's working. And you've done it too. Plenty of times. The trick is knowing how to wrap and tuck without tripping. Historians still argue whether this rain wrap maneuver evolved from ceremonial dress customs or was simply a desperate innovation born from too many surprise downpours. There's even an old proverb, better a wrinkled sarong than a wet liver. You're not sure what it means, but it sounds wise. Mainstream historical sources agree that the sarong was among the most versatile garments in Southeast Asia. Not just clothing, but bedding, baby carriers, privacy curtains, and, when the sky opens up, your last defense against absolute drenchitude. The fringe detail? Some sarongs were dyed with indigo, which had a slight water-repellent quality. You remember a traveling seller claiming his batik patterns had rain-blocking blessings stitched into the motifs. That turned out to be optimistic. His stall collapsed in a rain squall 30 minutes later. Still, it's not all improvisation. Some market-goers get fancy. You pass a spice seller sheltering beneath a contraption that looks suspiciously like a broken fishing basket mounted on a stick. It's bizarre, but somehow elegant. Her eyes meet yours, and she grins. Portable shade, she says. Also keeps away nosy monkeys. Others make do with what's nearby. You see a group of kids sheltering under an ox cart, giggling as water sheets off the roof like a tiny waterfall. A vendor next door has converted an old papaya crate into a makeshift awning by propping it up with firewood and draping it in palm fronds. The illusion of dryness is enough. You duck into a stall to avoid a sudden splash. Someone just slipped in a puddle carrying a tub of fermented cassava. It explodes like a tragic jellyfish. The woman next to you chuckles. "That's rain for you," she says. "Always hungry." In a corner of the market, you spot a young boy with a masterpiece of improvisation. He's holding two woven chicken baskets over his head like twin helmets. His arms are soaked, but his grin could part clouds. Everyone has their thing. Everyone adapts. You look around and realize something important. No one here is running from the rain. They're living in it, alongside it. Some grumble, sure, and a few probably curse at the clouds under their breath. But mostly, they just keep moving. Bargaining, laughing, eating roasted corn still steaming from a fire barely protected by a leaf roof that looks like it's losing the will to live. The rain in Java isn't just weather. It's a mood, a rhythm, a challenge, and a dance partner. It's why vendors arrive early, why roofs are slanted like fleeing cats, and why every sarong wearer becomes a reluctant origami artist by the time monsoon hits. You finally buy a handful of smoked fish, tucking them into your sash. A vendor offers you a chunk of palm sugar wrapped in dry banana leaf. You thank her, even though your hands are so pruny they look like they've aged 20 years. Your leaf shield is sagging again, your feet are muddy, and your sarong is riding up in a way that's probably not flattering. But hey, you're not alone. You head back out, slipping once on a mossy stone, but catching yourself just in time. You adjust your sarong cape with practiced ease. It's wet. It smells faintly like river mud and pickled mango, but it'll do. By now, you've accepted it. You're going to be wet for the foreseeable future. You've tried leaves, hats, cloaks, and your trusty sarong poncho, but today, you're working near the temple complex. Stone paths, carved staircases, mossy walls, and that's a different kind of wet altogether. Slick, echoey, and somehow even colder. The rain here doesn't just soak your skin, it seeps into your bones. You shuffle toward the rear courtyard where the artisans work, chipping at stone or patching temple figures with mixtures of resin and powdered lime. They're wet too, but they don't look miserable. In fact, a few are covered in what can only be described as slop. You ask because you have to. What is that on your skin? One sculptor grins. Raincoat, he says, the itchy kind. Turns out, when you're carving wet stone all day with bare arms exposed to the elements, some folks developed a kind of organic body coating to resist the chill. A mix of coconut oil, crushed lichen, ash, and, in the weirder corners of the island, finely ground rice husk. The result? A sticky, grayish paste smeared over shoulders and backs like medieval sunscreen, if sunscreen was designed to smell like rotting firewood. The logic was simple. The oil repelled water, the ash thickened it, and the lichen supposedly kept the skin sealed against wind. Historians still argue whether this mixture actually worked, or whether the users simply stopped feeling anything through the numbness. Either way, it became common among stonecutters, roof thatchers, and even those lucky few who cleaned temple drains during the rainy season. And if you thought that was strange, just wait. Some workers believed that applying soot from burnt fig trees would confuse the rain spirits, making them avoid you. You're pretty sure that just made them look like grumpy statues. But hey, who's judging? You duck into the shadow of a crumbling shrine. A sculptor is balancing on a ladder, his hair slicked flat from the rain, but his body glistening with the weird slop like some kind of damp lizard man. Every time the wind hits, It peels water right off his back in slick, gliding beads. You are, embarrassingly, impressed. So you ask to try it, just a little. The man hands you a gourd shell scoop, and you smear a cautious layer across your forearm. It's gritty, warm, not pleasant. It smells faintly of wet mushrooms and smoke. But within minutes, the rain beads up on your skin like you've just gone semi-waterproof. You spend the next hour helping patch roof tiles around the outer shrine. The work is slow, careful. One slip and you'll tumble down into a decorative lotus pond that, from this height, looks more like a frog jacuzzi. But the rain doesn't bother you as much now. Your makeshift barrier holds. This fringe method wasn't common knowledge. In fact, many high-caste villagers avoided it entirely, claiming it was too earthy. But the temple laborers swore by it. Some even added drops of ginger or turmeric to the mixture, claiming it kept the cold from sinking too deep. There are whispered rumors that warriors on long jungle patrols used similar slathers, both to repel water and to mask their scent from tigers. Historians still debate whether those stories are true or just bravado baked in jungle steam. You glance down at your now gray hands. You feel ridiculous, but also dry, and that's a rare feeling these days. Someone nearby offers you another upgrade, a palm fiber shoulder wrap soaked in heated oil. It's stiff, but the warmth feels incredible. The wrap, called bantal bahu, was common among traveling craftsmen who couldn't afford to dry off every hour. It would trap body heat like a low-budget thermal vest, even when soaked. Add a bark hood and your lichen paste, and you start to resemble something between a forest ghost and a tree stump, but a very dry one. Later, during a rest break, you sit on a pile of bundled straw and sip lukewarm tea. Rain patters against the tiles above, steady and soft. The lichen paste is flaking slightly now. You rub your arms and realize you haven't shivered once in the past few hours. Maybe there's something to this slathering ritual after all. You glance around at the other workers. Some are brushing stone lintels, others balancing trays of flowers and incense for temple offerings. All of them are soaked, steaming, layered in mud and effort. But no one complains. Not really. Because in this world, everyone is always half wet, and those who find a way to embrace it are the ones who get things done. You stand up and stretch. The rain has slowed, not stopped, never stopped, but eased into a lazy drizzle. Your shoulder wrap rustles like paper bark. Your arms smell like a forest after fire. And somehow, for the first time today, you don't mind. You head back down the temple path. The stones are slick. The mist curls through mossy corners. But you walk steady, protected by a pace, a plan, and just enough local wisdom to keep you from slipping into the frog pond. It's early morning now, and the rain is already falling, light and misty, like the sky's still waking up. You're not on a temple path today or a village trail. You're in the lowlands, near the rice barges and the docks, where trade boats creak against their moorings, and people like you, people without noble blood or dry shoes, do the heavy lifting. You're a porter today. Or maybe a culip, someone whose job it is to carry loads no one else wants, through puddles no one else will step in. You're soaked before you even start. Because here in the docks, being dry isn't even a goal. It's a joke. You hoist a sack of salted fish onto your back, the weight pulling your shoulders down and squeezing out the last pockets of dry in your tunic. Ahead, another worker stumbles past, grunting beneath a bundle of logs wrapped in banana bark, his head covered with half a gourd, a literal gourd, hollowed out, strapped on with a string under the chin like some ancient crash helmet. You blink. You've seen a lot in the past week, but this is new. Turns out when you're desperate, gourds work surprisingly well. Split them, hollow them, and you've got a semi-rigid dome that can deflect rain better than most leaves. Not comfy, not stylish. But again, we're deep in the functional over fashionable phase of ancient Javanese rainwear. Banana bark was also popular among dock workers and prisoners alike. Stripped from the tree's outer layers, dried for flexibility, and then pressed into flat sheets, it could be wrapped over the shoulders or even folded into crude ponchos. When layered, the bark became surprisingly absorbent, at least for a while. Problem was, once saturated, it clung to the skin like a cold eel and started to tear if you moved too quickly. But for the poorest of the poor, it beat standing naked in a monsoon. Historians still argue whether this banana bark wrapping tradition had any formal origin, or if it was just the inevitable result of having banana trees everywhere. There are even early Javanese folk tales of spirits who disguised themselves in banana bark to sneak through villages during rainstorms. Most ended with someone getting haunted or turned into a frog. You keep your head down and your grip steady. The dock's surface is slick, worn from centuries of feet and floods. You pass a prisoner gang in loose chains, carrying clay bricks up from a barge. They're half naked, but a few have tried to fashion covers. Torn reed mats tied around the waist, and one man with a turtle shell strapped across his back, like an accidental superhero. You're not sure if it's effective. You're also not about to laugh. That man is carrying 3 bricks more than you are. The fringe detail? Some porters made arm guards from woven pandanus and tree bark, not to block rain, but to keep their skin from blistering when wet clothes started chafing during long shifts. And yes, there was a plant-based paste for that too. Usually crushed ginger mixed with oil and smeared under the arms and thighs. It worked, mostly, if you didn't mind smelling like lunch. You spot a cluster of workers huddled under an overturned canoe. They've rigged a few poles and a patch of fishing net to form a loose tent. Underneath, someone is boiling rice in a battered pot and whistling off-key. The air smells like smoke, salt, and damp wood. You duck under for a moment, joining the steam and the soft mutter of shared complaints. Rain again, someone grunts. Always rain, someone else answers. You nod. No need to contribute. The rain says everything. After your break, you're back at it. Your shoulders ache. Your palms are raw. The gourd helmet slips sideways every few minutes, and you have to straighten it before it catches too much water and dumps it down your back. You're beginning to understand why some people just gave up and stayed wet. And that was the ultimate truth for many laborers. If you were hauling bricks, cutting reeds, or hauling sacks of seaweed in and out of the surf, you didn't waste energy trying to fight the rain. You accepted it. You wore thin clothes that dried fast. You bathed in the river as soon as you finished. You got used to the feel of fabric clinging to your knees and mud caked in your toenails. It was part of the job. Some days, even banana bark felt like a luxury. Some days, it was just you, your skin, and the sky. As the sun sets, though the clouds still hide it, you walk home slowly, your legs sore, your back stiff. The gourd helmet now hangs from your side, your shirt tied around your waist. You've given up on dry. Dry is for nobles, priests, and people who have time to chase palm leaves. You're just trying to get home before the next downpour starts. Too late. The rain returns with its usual flair, fast, cold, relentless. You duck beneath a tree for a moment, but it's pointless. You're already soaked. Again. But somehow you smile. You're tougher than you were this morning. You've worn bark like armor. You've balanced a gourd on your head. You've marched through puddles so deep they nearly stole your sandals. And you're still standing. You wake to the patter of rain tapping your thatched roof like 1,000 tiny fingers. Again. It never really stopped, just paused. And today, you're not a porter or a temple worker or a jungle pilgrim. Today, you're just you, at home, trying to live a normal life while the sky insists on dumping its entire personality on your head. You're not alone. Everyone in the village is drenched. Again. And now comes the most baffling coping mechanism of all. Magic. See, when you've tried palm fronds, banana bark, bark paste, fishnet cloaks, and your sarong in 5 different rain poncho configurations, what's left? A good old-fashioned spell. You glance outside and see your neighbor tying a frog-shaped charm to the post of her front step. That's not a decoration. It's a pengasihan hujan, a charm meant to sweet-talk the rain into stopping. The frog shape is important. Frogs love rain, right? So maybe if you make the rain think a frog has already claimed this house, it'll go bother someone else. Flawless logic. Another neighbor is muttering under her breath while burning coconut husk ash in a small clay pot. She's walking in circles. You ask what she's doing. She tells you not to interrupt. It's rain deflection. You nod slowly and back away. People take their anti-rain spells seriously. Mainstream historical texts do mention weather rituals in ancient Java, especially during the Srivijaya and Mataram periods. Many of these involved mantras, flower offerings, and rhythmic clapping. There are records of rain shamans, yes, that was a thing, who claimed they could control the clouds through chant alone. Historians still argue whether they were respected spiritual leaders or very theatrical weathermen. But the fringe stuff? That's where things get spicy. Some believed that if you painted a tiny image of a tortoise on your doorway using turmeric paste, it would keep the rain from entering. Others said hanging a string of garlic above your lintel would confuse the sky. Confuse it, as if the rain were some bored spirit bumbling around like, wait, is that garlic? Guess I'll go elsewhere. You've even heard stories about rainstones, smooth black pebbles said to be batu hujan, passed down through families. Place one in a bowl of rice under the floorboards, and allegedly the rain would lighten. You tried it once. The rice sprouted. And then there's the classic, the child parade. When the monsoon overstayed its welcome, some villages would take the youngest girl, dress her in banana leaves, and parade her through the streets while other children sang. The idea was that the gods would be so charmed or amused They'd reward you with sunshine. It sounds harmless until you remember the leaf outfit starts to sag after 10 minutes, and toddlers have no patience for divine bargaining. You see one happening now, down by the river path. A small girl trudges along, trailed by a group of other children banging on pots. The adults watch from doorways, arms folded, trying to pretend this doesn't look like rain-themed theater. You've tried your share of spells too. Once, you carved a small rain spirit face into a piece of coconut shell and hid it in your roof beams. It didn't work. You forgot about it, and 6 months later, a nest of ants moved in and chewed through your thatching. But in the end, the belief isn't just about stopping the rain. It's about feeling like you did something. You can't always shield yourself with leaves. You can't always find a dry corner. But if you whisper the right thing to the clouds, if you tie the charm just so, maybe, just maybe, they'll leave you alone for a bit. And even when they don't, you've got the community. Rain rituals aren't solo acts. They're collective declarations. A village saying, we're in this together, and we're going to trick the sky if it kills us. Back at your own hut, you finally decide to try something. Not a spell exactly, but a tradition. You take a few strands of young coconut leaf and weave a tiny frog. You hang it on the end of a stick, plant it near your threshold, and squint up at the sky. The clouds rumble. You nod as if to say, your move. The rain continues. Of course it does. But you grin anyway, because you didn't just accept it this time. You answered it. And who knows? Maybe tomorrow your frog will work. Maybe the turmeric tortoise will come through. Maybe the gods will finally say, okay, we get it. Enough with the banana leaf parades. Or maybe not. But at least, for a moment, you felt like you had a say in it all. You wake to the sound of rain again, but this time, it barely registers. At this point, it's as normal as roosters, smoke, or the smell of pickled shrimp paste. Rain isn't a surprise. It's the background music of your entire life. Outside, the world glistens in every shade of wet. Dripping rafters, soggy chickens, a dog that looks like it gave up on being dry 4 days ago. You step out barefoot, because what's the point in trying to keep your feet dry? The mud is warm and squelchy between your toes. You don't even flinch, and that's when it hits you. Not the rain, but the realization. You've stopped fighting it. You've used leaves, bark, hats, cloaks, sarongs, slop, and spells. You've ducked under carts, wrapped your head in palm fronds, and prayed to frogs. And yet here you are, standing outside in the rain, and not minding it, not even a little. Because the truth is, in ancient Java, wet was just a way of life. You weren't supposed to stay dry all the time. You were supposed to adapt. You learned to make tools out of plants and clothes out of bark. You turned banana leaves into blankets and palm fibers into roofs. You sang to the clouds, bribed them with chili smoke, and charmed them with frog-shaped dolls. Historians often emphasize the technological limitations of ancient Southeast Asia. No waterproof fabrics, no oilcloths, no waxed coats like Europe would later develop. But what they sometimes miss is that the people didn't view rain as a problem to be solved. It was a partner in the dance. It gave rice, it fed rivers, it cleaned the air, it washed away old footprints and made everything smell like life. Sure, You tried to stay dry sometimes, but mostly, you just made peace with the rain. There were even social customs built around wetness. Guests arriving at a home were offered a dry sarong if the host had one to spare, not as a courtesy, but as a statement. We understand, we live in the same storm. It was empathy soaked into cotton. Children played in puddles without warning. Elders told stories during downpours with the sound of rain as percussion. Lovers shared capings, leaning close not for romance, but for mutual dryness, though sometimes the two were hard to tell apart. You remember seeing an old couple, maybe 70 if they were a day, walking through the drizzle hand in hand under a patched-up barkcloth wrap. They didn't move fast. They didn't bother with umbrellas. They moved like people who knew the rain couldn't take anything they weren't ready to let it have. And that's what life was in Java. Wet hair, slippery stones, rice steaming while the sky roared, damp tunics clinging to spines, every hut with a leak, every traveler with a leaf, every spirit, charm, and God both loved and feared the clouds. Historians still argue whether rain was treated as a divine blessing or a seasonal curse, but for most, it was just there, like gravity, like breath. And now, so are you, kneeling by the fire, warming your hands, watching droplets slide off the eaves. There's a fresh palm frond drying nearby. Your sarong is damp. Your skin glows faintly with oil and lichen from yesterday's work. You're not dry, but you're not cold. You're not annoyed. You're alive in the rain. And finally, you understand why no one really used umbrellas, because you didn't need them. And now, as the rain slows to a whisper and the frogs begin their soft evening chorus, you settle down onto your woven mat, the one that still smells faintly of sun-dried reed and river mud. The fire has dwindled to embers. A single clay lamp flickers on the windowsill, its flame casting golden ripples on the wall. You lie back, letting your body go heavy. Outside, the rain continues, but now it's just a hush, a sleepy heartbeat falling from the sky, one droplet at a time. The wind is gentle, nudging the palm fronds. Somewhere in the distance, a lullaby is being hummed, off-key, but warm. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the drizzle, each breath deeper, softer. You remember the feel of that bark cloak, the silly gourd hat, the frog charms swinging gently in the wind, the warm tea after a wet walk home. You remember the laughter in the market, the whispered chants to Dewi Shri, the quiet companionship of strangers huddled under leaves. You don't need to run from the storm anymore. You are part of it. Let the rain keep falling. Let the past wrap around you like a blanket woven from mist and memory. Let your thoughts float, soft as banana leaves in a river, drifting farther with each exhale. You're safe. You're dry enough. And for tonight, the rain will watch over you. Close your eyes. Sleep well.